I'd like to start by extending a thank you to the MultiversX team. We've been collaborating for a while, but it's the first time I meet the team in person, so thank you all for having me. Really excited to present to everyone here today. So today I'm going to talk about cross-chain. Since the emergence of Bitcoin in early 2009, there have really been three transformative technologies in blockchain infrastructure. The first one of these technologies was the launch of the EVM, the Ethereum Virtual Machine, which allowed developers to build any application they can conceive on top of a blockchain. The second technology was the launch of multiple different layer 1s or layer 2s that allowed for blockchains to scale. This gave developers optionality. It also allowed applications to have their own block space and capture the value of the infrastructure layer. And the third big innovation has been interoperability technology. Now, in a world with multiple blockchains, we have scalability, we have options for developers, but the technology is impossible to use. You have fragmentation. So really, the goal with interoperability is to make Web3 usable, to allow developers to build on the best platform for their use cases, while still being able to access users from any other platform. And this is what I'm going to talk about today. Interoperability is an important technology, but why is it actually important, and how is Axelar solving this problem? So to start, I'd like to quantify the importance of this technology. To start, it's pretty clear today that no single blockchain itself can scale. If you look at the EVM, there's fundamental limitations of how many transactions you can do per day. If you take any real-world case application from Web 2 today, it's going to be impossible to put it even on a single blockchain today. So for the space to scale, to have hundreds of applications, we are going to need hundreds of application-specific chains. And in a world with hundreds of application-specific chains, most of the transactions are going to be cross-chain. If we think of how users use applications today, typically you go on something like Ethereum, you do a swap, then after a while you get a loan, maybe you go and buy an NFT. Every fourth or so transaction is across different applications. And in a world where those applications live across different chains, those cross-application transactions are going to be cross-chain transactions. And my estimate, my personal estimate, is that every fourth or so transaction will be cross-chain, meaning that the cross-chain infrastructure is going to capture around 25% of all the blockchain transactions. And to get there, we need robust interoperability infrastructure. And to build this interoperability infrastructure, we need to focus on three core pillars. The first such pillar is security. As I'm sure you all know, last year, more than $1 billion was lost in cross-chain hacks. And the main cause of those hacks was centralization. A custodian, typically the founder of a project, would hold all the funds in some private key, and then an attacker would get access to those keys and siphon all the funds. And we saw this happening over and over and over. So this is something we need to solve. The second is easy to add new chains. In a world with hundreds of thousands of chains, we need to be able to catch up, add new chains fast. And finally, we wanted to make it very easy for developers to build on top. Right? A developer should be able to build on any blockchain they want and be able to deploy endpoints on every other blockchain that will allow users to access their application from anywhere. So these are the key three pillars. Let's unpack each single one of them. The first big one is security. So with Axelar, instead of taking the usual approach of having a centralized custodian holding the funds or passing messages across chains, we were the first ones to build what we call decentralized security. When you pass a message or assets from one blockchain to another through Axelar, you actually depend on the battle-tested model of proof-of-stake security. This is the same model that powers all of the major layer 1s today, like Ethereum mainnet, MultiversX, Polygon, Avalanche. It's the tried-and-tested approach in the space. We currently have 75 validators with Axelar. It's a permissionless set, so for any validators in the audience, you can join the validator set and further secure the network. And every time you pass a message from one chain to another, you need the majority of those validators to actually agree. And as an attacker, you would have to corrupt all those validators. right? So this really solves the big problem we've had in the space where you can corrupt the private keys of a centralized entity and steal the funds, right? So this is the first part. Of course, this is only theoretical security. We actually need very good engineering practices as well in order to prevent other types of attacks. With Axelar, we've done 30+ audits at this point across different parts of the stack. We have very high bug bounties, application-specific contingencies, like rate limits. For example, with Axelar, we have a very simple piece of code so that when you transfer big assets, like USDC, you should only be able to transfer something like $10 million worth of assets every 6 hours. And this is a very simple piece of code. It's a final check before funds are sent out. So even if someone manages to corrupt the more complex part of the code, you still have this final contingency, right? And finally, we also have validator key rotations. This is a very strong principle from cryptography. No matter how decentralized you are, you don't want to be having stale keys in the system, right? You always want to be refreshing them because it makes it easier for an attacker to target them. So if an attacker manages to get the old keys of the system, they still will not be able to steal any money or do much harm. So these are some of the core principles built Axelar around. And this decentralized security, this notion of decentralized security, is something that only Axelar has today on the market. Virtually everything else is some flavor of a custodial solution. The next pillar is how do we make it easy to add new chains? With Axelar, because we launched with a decentralized validator set and we have a blockchain, we have a really nice advantage in that we have hub-and-spoke architecture. Namely, when you connect a new chain to Axelar, you can route messages through the hub to every other chain in the ecosystem. Until today, the standard approach for passing messages across chains or connecting new chains would be to connect chains directly. So imagine if Axelar was not there in the middle, you have to actually do multiple pairwise connections, and even with 50 chains, it would have to be thousands of connections. This is very hard to manage on the back end. It's still doable, but it's very, very hard to manage. So what this allows us to do is when we have a new chain like MultiversX, which is a new VM, it has some unique properties, you need to be able to translate messages from MultiversX to other chains. And that's why we created a unique connection to MultiversX through Axelar. And then when a message from MultiversX lands on the Axelar network, we do any translation necessary, we do the validation, and we can forward it to any other network in the ecosystem. What's more, we're working with a lot of enterprise partners, and those partners want to permission their connections. Again, if you want to do pairwise connections, you would need to permission basically 50 of them, right? It's a lot of work, it's very expensive. While with Axelar, you instantiate one permission connection with your private bank chain, and then you can access the whole set of chains, right? So this is really a very nice advantage for new VMs, for enterprise chains, but also for something like layer 2s, right? So the other nice thing this approach gives us is that we have smart contracts on top of Axelar. And that means that we can automate the deployment of new layer 2 chains. So as you probably know, Optimism and many of the other layer 2 stacks have their own SDKs that allow people to launch their own chains on top. So what we're working with those teams is to enable this automation that will allow anyone to, when they deploy a chain, to bundle in Axelar and effectively get interoperability day one and with minimal friction. And this is going to be revolutionary because until today, to connect a new chain to even one other chain, it usually takes at least a week and a lot of man-hours. But with this new programmability approach, and thanks to Axelar's hub-and-spoke architecture, this whole flow is going to be automated, and we're going to be able to scale to hundreds or thousands of blockchains faster than anyone else. And finally, the last pillar I want to talk about is the seamless developer experience, right? It's great if we can pass information between chains, solves a big problem, but it still has to be very easy for developers to build applications on top of it. And with Axelar, we have a full stack interoperability solution. We have at the bottom the Axelar network that passes messages between chains. On top of that, we have relayer services, monitoring services. What happens if the transaction doesn't go through? You can fully monitor in on Axelar Scan, which is a block explorer. We have services that allow you to pay gas only on the origin chain. So if a user wants to spend an asset on Ethereum, but access an application on MultiversX, they would only pay gas in the ETH token, in the native gas token of the Ethereum blockchain. So we have all these services. But for this presentation, I want to talk about something else that it's actually kind of new, and it's really going to revolutionize how people build applications. So one of the key barriers of adoption for cross-chain in general is that it's very hard to build on multiple different chains. As an example, we often see developers that want to build cross-chain, they want to launch on 10 chains. Typically, it may take them 4 months to write the core logic of their application, but it will actually take them another 8 months to deploy on 10 different chains, make small changes because different EVMs, they have different opcodes, make sure they test every connection, make sure everything's reliable. It's a ton of work for them, right? And imagine you're a small startup, you want to go to market fast, get some feedback from the community, improve your product. This is going to be really hard to do if you have to spend 3x the time to go to market. And that's why everyone keeps building on a single chain. So basically, with Axelar, we have this notion where we say you build once, build on the chain you like, but you can still run everywhere. So we're going to have this developer tooling that's very similar to Kubernetes in Web 2, where a developer is going to launch their application in one place, and we have services that can deploy your code on every other chain. It can manage it on your behalf in a trustless way, and it really lowers the barrier of adoption for people who want to build cross-chain. I'm getting the time is up here. I think I have 3 more minutes, but can someone from the team confirm? We're good? All right. So for the last part, we have a video, actually, that demonstrates how you can take any single token cross-chain with this notion of build it on one chain, and then we have a no-code solution that lets you take the token everywhere. So I want to see if this video plays real quick. So basically, you have a token on Avalanche, you copy the address, you paste it on this web page we have, you select the number of chains you want. You're gonna, you select the chains. Basically, you click deploy on the network you are, you pay some gas in the AvaX token, and shortly after, the contract is going to be deployed everywhere. So this is just like the proof of concept for tokens, but imagine as a developer, you deploy your application code in one place. You will be able, through a simple front end, to take this code multi-chain, take it anywhere, and you won't even need to be a developer, right? Anyone can do it. So this is the future of cross-chain, and this is the future of application development in blockchain. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about what it means to be successful in the cross-chain space, right? Which cross-chain standard will win. And the idea here is that every single application is going to touch cross-chain. And the winner in this space is going to be the layer that's integrated into every single application. And with Axelar, we're already on track to be integrated into every major application in the space. We take blue-chip DeFi applications like Uniswap, Lido, DYDX. We already have deep integrations and relationships with many of them. As an example, DYDX, which is going to be launching their chain in 2-3 weeks, they're using Axelar for one-click onboarding. So if you have an asset on any of the 50 chains that are connected to Axelar, you will be able to onboard to the DYDX chain within 20 seconds and use their money market, so their derivatives protocol on their Cosmos chain. Another really interesting initiative that actually just went live last week was with Ondo Finance. Ondo Finance is the leader in US tokenized treasuries. They're the leading product there, and they did a deep integration with Axelar so they can burn their US Treasury token, USDY, on one chain and mint it on another chain. And I think this is the first time in the history of the space where a heavily regulated player actually depended on a third-party solution to pass assets across chains. And hopefully this will pave the way for more players to feel comfortable with it. And a big part of why Ondo wanted to work with us was from a security perspective, decentralization matters, but more importantly, they don't want to be custodians, right? Because if they work with everyone else, they were going to be custodians from a regulatory perspective. So Axelar is already working with all major applications, or most major applications today, and is on track to do bigger integrations with everyone, deeper integrations, and being used by everyone in the space, right? So if you're a developer or you want to know more, please scan this QR code. Our team is very responsive. You can find us, like, happy to talk to anyone. I personally spent a lot of time talking to developers and happy to answer any questions, either after this or please find us online, and we'd love to hear from you.